We don't build enough coalitions in communities of color. Everybody wants to do their own thing and be siloed with whatever organization they have. The reality is the only way you win this fight is if you get a critical mass of people, from all the folks on this panel to the Urban League to all of these institutes and research entities that come together and say we collectively want to either defeat this bill, as Barbara mentioned, or influence this bill in a way that works for our communities. Thank you.
I'd like to add to that too, that also too in this community, we have to do a better job of doing what we say we're gonna do. So that some of those people in the beginning, I remember when this thing, when I met Steve O'Neill and the other members of EPICO, you came down about 40 deep, I think, November 10th, right? So when I met these folks and others at the State House, we went to your office. I went right to your office and talked to the lady out front, the little white lady, and then I went and talked to try to get some. No, you know what it was? It was that day that you was on the tour. You was on the tour that day, son. So in any event, because we were right in that conference room. My point being is that many people have now given promises of, okay, I'm going to work on something. I'm going to give you the data. Or, okay, I got the list from the last meeting. We're going to circulate that. And then you never hear nothing again from them, right? Okay, so what we have to do too, there's two components to it. One is, yes, we want to build coalitions, but I can't hold my breath while you bump this up on your priority list, right? So there's some stuff that people got to move on anyway, because a lot of times in activism and organization, we don't have the luxury of time. I don't want to even say they tried or attempted to sneak this by us. They snuck it by us, okay? It came in around November 7th. The vote was November 10th. They knew everybody was about to get high on turkey and cranberry sauce, and then on into Christmas, and then they have the break, and then they knew they was coming back in January. And now too, one of the next moves we have to do is this conference committee that's coming up, January 12th. How many of y'all would be down to go to the State House?
But you better notify us.
Yeah, that's why we have the contact list. Right. That's why we have the contact list. And also too, you talking to a brother here, you'll see it just like you saw it before. There'll be big 24 by 36 inch flyers on electric boxes and flyers and phone booths and pizza places and liquor stores. We get it out there. So keep your eyes open, look for it. If you signed up on the list, we will get that information to you. You will hear from us on this and be ready to move. And we're going to be talking about action items more and more at the end of this.
The Church and Praise, we've been doing a lot of research in the community with respect to the high rates of incarceration and this particular bill. And a couple of things I want to say. One, we must understand that the impact of money in this process and the burden that's going to be created on taxpayers is actually enormous. Take for instance at the moment in Massachusetts, it takes $47,000 to support one inmate a year, for one inmate annually. But it takes $10,000 to take care of a K-12 child in Massachusetts. $10,000. But it takes $47,000 to support an inmate 1 year, to take care of an inmate 1 year. You must also know that if this particular bill passes, it will take close to $11 million to hire new parole officers. Okay? And not only that, but it's going to take more than $1 million up to $125 million to take care of the whole process. You see, this is excluding a couple of the building of new prisons. So when we talk about money, okay, there is the link. As much as we lobby against this particular bill, we have fought against private prison, like the brother was saying. Private prison look for longer sentences, okay? Wherever longer sentences are enacted, legislated, you will find private prisons appearing. Briefly, at the end of 2010, remember this, two of the biggest private prisons in the United States, GEO and CEA, made close to $3 billion. $3 billion. All on the backs of bondage and misery. All on the backs of bondage and misery. Now when we bring it home to Massachusetts, take for instance, in Massachusetts, this is the problem. Okay? In 2010, according to the latest report, which is this, Prison Population Trend 2010, Massachusetts Department of Correction report. It says this, and I'll read it for you. It says in 2010, 49% of males and 41% of females entered the Massachusetts Department of Correction with less than a 9th grade reading level. In 2010, 47% of males and 37% of females entered the Massachusetts Department of Correction with less than 6th grade math level. 6th grade math level. And if you begin to look at the statistics, the amount of people that are incarcerated, more people who drop out of high school or do not have properly resourced school, okay, they go to prison. It's called the school to prison pipeline. That's what it's called. You see? And so as we talk about this particular three-strike bill, there are a couple of aspects that we need to be aware of. And the Center for Church and Prison basically resists this. One is the fact that there is going to be the imposition of mandatory post-release supervision. Now we have talked about this for a while because we feel if a person has wrapped up the sentences, they should be free to go about and do something, to have some jobs, and experience some form of economic mobility.
That's right.
Because if a person has a job, statistics have proven it, research have proven it, that this person is not going to easily receive it, go back to prison if they have some means, some legal means of earning some money. But this is the impact of a mandatory post-release supervision. Once the person comes out and they have mandatory post-release supervision imposed upon them, according to this particular report from the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security, one of the major solutions is that mandatory post-release supervision be imposed upon everyone who has wrapped up their sentences. This is the implication. Take, for instance, you've got Corey, okay? You've got Corey. We've done a couple of job fairs in the community with respect to advocating for people with Corey for jobs. You've got Corey, and you go to an employer. The employer looks at your record and says, one, you've got Corey, but you are under mandatory post-release supervision. Why should I hire you? Why should I hire you? Isn't that a double jeopardy?
Yeah.
Isn't that a dilemma for the person who has wrapped up their sentence? It's Corey and it's mandatory post-release supervision. The question then becomes, at what point will mandatory post-release supervision end and who pays for it? You see, the individual is paying almost their parole fee. You see, it's difficult for them to get a job. It's difficult for them to get a house. So we must begin to look at this particular thing systematically when we make a call to Governor Deval Patrick. Because not only will you see the implication being reflected in the life of the inmate, but the life of his immediate family as well, which is increasing generational poverty, impoverishment. Because he cannot make money to support his family, eventually his children might end up in the street and going back to prison. And the community begins to suffer from poverty as well. So we must look at it, one, from a strategic perspective, two, from a very existential perspective because it affects you, also from an economic perspective, and then also from a judicial perspective because it is unjust. It is unjust. The Center for Church and Prison believe as Dr. John Ross says, justice is fairness. Justice is fairness. We're talking about equality in the legal system. In the criminal justice system of Massachusetts, it's in that light we oppose this particular bill, and we ask you to pick up the phone and call Governor Patrick and tell him this bill is not a good bill. We want it to be defeated. Thank you.
If you could pass that microphone down.
Just one comment. The talk about private prisons made me think that we can also be a little more creative, perhaps, in our strategy. I actually would disagree. I don't think there's a bullseye over Massachusetts when it comes to private prisons. The northeastern part of the country is very different from the rest of the country in that we have strong public employee unions. Very strong public employee unions. Well, hold on, Marjorie. Let me just give my 2 cents worth in here. And that's a quick shout out to the National Association of Social Workers who've been fabulous on these issues. But you still have to let me finish. So one of the things that we've seen in other states when significant issues are being discussed is that the correctional guards union, correctional officers union, whatever they're called, the guards, they often really weigh in on the wrong side of these issues. I think it's interesting. Have you heard them weigh in here? No. And that is significant because when you have overcrowded prisons, it's a danger to the people who work in them. So I think this is one of the chances to look at who are the allies that we may be overlooking. I think labor is a huge ally for a lot of these issues because they don't want to see their people in unsafe situations either. So I think we can continue to think creatively about where we can link up with other groups that we may not think of right off the top of our heads as being allies in these issues.
Yeah, and then too, we'll make your comments. We're opening up for questions now too, so if you want to start raising your hand, this young gentleman is going to come right to you with a portable microphone so you can be heard without having to move the luxury of your seat. Okay?
I just wanted to, I love Barbara. I want to say a word for, if they may not be privatizing prisons yet in Massachusetts, but the food services, the medical care, the phone, horrendous programs where people get paid to do these programs that are related to the DOC and no money for people who want to do programs on their own. Having said that, the Massachusetts Correctional Federated Union is not a union because they are not laborers, they are not workers, they are overseers. They should not be called workers or unions. They may come from the same class of people that we are, but they are not our friends. In fact, they're overpaid, they have no accountability. The most dangerous people in prison come home every day at shift's end. The violence that is happening in prisons is almost always at the hands of state employees. So that's a misnomer that that's a union. It's not.
Where's Jesse at with the microphone? Okay, after Stefano, can you please get Counselor Yancey? What's happening? You got the thing too close.
Well, first and foremost, I just want to commend Jamal and all of the organizers to get along.
This is somebody else. Everybody.
So, again, I just want to commend Jamal and all of the organizers as well as acknowledging that the Black and Latino Legislative Caucus have been mobilized and coming out to act on this horrible bill. And I work in a foundation, and I'm very pleased to see one of the organizations here represented as a panelist. But there were some very key words that were used, and I'm not sure if it's the panel that should answer, but Michael used the word lobby. Carlos talked about slip by, and which everyone has talked about follow the money. And for me, and then coming from the philanthropic world, I know that there are funding streams attached to this type of work. So I guess my question is, where did the money come from in order to slip this bill by so many people in the Black and Latino Legislative Caucus? And if our backs are up against the wall on possibly having a passage of this bill, what are the implications of really fighting and combating against the racist implications of slipping something like this by us? And maybe, Michael, you might want to answer or address that, but I think that another thing is that, I'll finally say this, is that there will be funding streams, and I assume that some money may have already been released to possibly behind the door, just as well as how this bill ended up in conference committee so quickly. And there will be separation. So I'm just saying that, how did this happen, and where did the money come from to slip it by so many people who should have been aware of it?
This bill moved at a fast speed, and what you've seen today is you've seen the far-reaching scope of this bill and all the details in it. So this bill did not slip by the Black and Latino Caucus. As soon as we got information that it was coming from the Senate, we immediately started meeting amongst ourselves and with the community, which is why we've had these couple of community meetings and had these conversations. Now, what our point is to get this process slowed down so that we can review every single detail of this bill because of its complexity. And if we don't slow the process down, that is when we miss the details that are so critical in controlling where the funding goes to, where programs are, whether we're paying for incarceration or whether we're paying for substance abuse programs and mental health treatment programs. So there are two schools of thought, and I want to incorporate another question into this answer. So we can either fight to veto this bill, and just to be clear on strategy, to get this bill vetoed, I want to remind everybody that this passed unanimously in the Senate, and it might not do it again, but it might, I doubt it'll get a majority. And in the House, it passed 137 to 12. So if we call the governor, 142 to 12? 142 to 12. So if we call the governor and ask him to veto it, we still need 55 members of the House of Representatives to sustain that vote. So almost 43 people have to change their vote from a yes vote to a no. That's a lot of lobbying, that's a lot of phone calls. So we can work on that as a strategy, and we can also work on changing what's going on in the bill to make sure that we do have substance abuse treatment, which I haven't seen a lot of in there. We do have mental health treatment. We do have job training programs. And as we talk about education, our school systems are not the only place education has to take place. It used to take place in our state prisons as well, and we should be able to put it back there through programming and classrooms. So those are the points we have to make. We can fight this fight twofold. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing in a zero-sum game. Choose which way you want to go. We can use you on both sides of the fight. The Black and Latino Caucus is organizing with our colleagues. In the Boston area, our chair is Representative Swan, but the leadership of Representative Rushing's office has been organizing the caucus. So please funnel your information through members of the caucus, funnel your questions through us. We are on top of it. There is nothing slipping by us, and that's why we're here in numbers today to show our solidarity alongside you. Thank you.
What role will the church play? What role will the church play?
None. You asked about the church, right?
You're talking about information, right?
Okay. I said we have been in contact with Reverend Gregory Groover. As you see, Reverend George is a clergy. Pastor Dickerson is right out there. Bishop Texera is here. So clergy has been involved and are looking to be helpful, and we just have to kind of find the way that they can be most helpful. And one of those ways is by the Senate. Reverend Bernard Coulter.
You have to give me type of order than Reverend Groover Church.
We're not going to do that. All right? The man is the director of the BMA. So in order to talk to the BMA, which is a membership that is not just Groover, right? I tend to go through Groover since he's the pastor of my grandma, my dead grandmother, rest in peace. The church that she went for 60 years. So if you don't mind, I'm going to talk to Groover. That's okay with you. Thank you. So, Charles Jensen.
Thank you very much. First of all, can we give a round of applause to Jamal Crawford and his panel? Of course, you should also give a round of applause to yourselves for coming out here this Saturday afternoon. I want to stand and ask one question from my perspective as your representative in city government. The city of Boston spends $2.4 billion a year. We employ more than 17,000 people. So my question has to do with our budget and what impact that may have on the discussions we've had this afternoon. Fully 85% of all personnel cuts for the current fiscal year was borne by the Boston Public Schools. We cut 16 positions from Boston Centers for Youth and Families. we added, listen to me, we added 16 positions to the Boston Police Department. Over the past 2 years, just in the city of Boston, we closed or privatized 14 community centers. 14. So a question I have for the panelists and more generally to the audience is what are we going to do about this? It's pretty obvious to me. Looking at what we're doing just in one of the 351 cities and towns of Massachusetts, the only city, incidentally, which cannot elect its school committee. We are effectively disinvesting in education, building new police stations like B2, hiring more police, cutting 200 positions from the school department, privatizing our community centers, and I am hard-pressed to hear anybody either inside this community or outside the community complain about it. Now, that's not a criticism of you, but it does raise the question about what is the connection between decisions being made in your city government, City of Boston's majority people of color. This city government belongs to you. And how can we be silent while we're disinvesting in our youth and investing in the criminal justice system and building new jail cells, etc.? So anyone on the panel wishes to respond to that may, but I'm really here to ask for your help as we go through the city's budget process as we prepare for fiscal year 2013. Thank you very much.
All right, so we got some.
We appropriate $30 million a year just for police overtime. However, every year, the police overspends their budget to the tune of another $10 million. So we average more than $40 million a year just to pay police overtime. And I think it's unconscionable that we make that type of expenditures while cutting back on programs that can support our young people, cutting back on programs where we can provide some mentorship opportunities. I've advocated hiring 300 youth workers and street workers, which would have cost the citizens of Boston $10 million. But instead, we're spending $40 million a year on police overtime. And to answer the second question, the last time we built a high school in the city of Boston, Jimmy Carter was president. 1979. And we have, well, I'll let the other experts talk about the number of jails. I know we built South Bay in that period of time. We rebuilt Nashville Street in that time. So we have 4,000 Boston Public High School students attending buildings constructed for elementary school children and middle school children, in old factory buildings, and even in the basement of the YWCA in 2012. That is not acceptable.
Can you expound on the privatization of the community centers?
Oh, hold on. In order to run a community meeting, we have to follow a couple of rules. So when we start blurting some stuff out, what it is it doesn't honor the other folks who have been patiently waiting to get their point across. So what we're going to do, I understand that people have some hot button topics and whatnot, and they got a lot on our heart, which once again is why we made the forum the length that we did. So we can have the time to go through this, and we don't have to feel rushed, and we got to get the panel out of here, and we don't want to hear from the people. No, this is about us. This is what it's about. So everybody's going, well, I'm going to say everybody, but a lot of people are going to be able to express their opinion today. This is an open forum, community public. This is what we do. We're not here to exclude anybody. All right, Councilor look like he's trying to take the empty panel chair. Hey, what? You gotta watch your head, boy. He's creeping on you. I love my councilor.
I'm not going to take any more of your time. Again, thank you so much for coming out. We will be holding a series of town meetings so we can get more of our folks engaged in the process of dealing with your municipal government. We're redrawing the district lines. And one of the things I'd like to say, Jamal, before giving up this mic, is that Boston is a diverse city. It's majority people of color. So how can we justify 5 out of the 9 districts being solidly white in the city as diverse as Boston is, at least 5 has to be districts of color. God bless you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor. As many of you may have already noticed, we have Mr. Mel King in the building. And Mr. King would like to say a few words to us about this subject.
I came here to support the efforts to stop this throwback to the slavery days legislation. For me, it's a simple process. Everyone who's in the room today needs to be in the State House when they're discussing this bill. And we need to make sure that they understand we ain't going anywhere until they change and eliminate this kind of bill. Anything short of that doesn't express our anger and our love for the people who they're trying to throw under the bus is not going to succeed. We need to let them know that this is so an important aspect of our community, of our brothers and sisters, that we are not going to stand by and let them lock the door, throw the key away on our family. We cannot allow that. And we have to be there. Every one of us has to be there and bring 2 or 3 other folks with you and let them know we ain't going anywhere. We ain't going anywhere until they change that. Now, I don't know who filed the bill. I don't know who supported the bill. I don't care. If it's the governor, we need to be in his face just as much. So, that's all I have to say. I'll be there. I'll be looking for you.
Okay, y'all, so I need y'all to work with me a little bit. So since the microphone situation has not worked out to the best, we are not going to be able to travel around. So those people, I got you. Those people with questions, if you could, begin to kind of move to the 2 sides of the room, all right? Because we're going to have to use these built-in microphones for questions, okay? So those who questions, I know my brother here, Ken, had his hands up, my brother there, Sister Priscilla, all that. So matter of fact, why don't we start off, Sister Priscilla, come on up here, start us off.
Hello, everybody. My question is, I'm interested in the actions that we're going to take to get this done. Because it seems like this just got passed, it just went right through us. So we want to know what action steps we are going to take to get this done. And we need to have everybody that's in this room and more at the State House. We got to let them know that enough is enough. It's not okay. Our children are being affected by this bill. And we need to stand up and speak and not be fearful. So that's my question. What are we going to do to get it done?
Okay, the action items are pretty simple, and that's going to be the last phase of the meeting here. Yes, the action items are simple. One, we're asking people to call your own, your individual representative or senator. Are we clear on that? Action item number 1, call the person who represents you for where you live, your representative, your senator. Senator, tell them you're against it. If you live in these areas that are represented by the mass Black Latino Legislative Caucus, they already got it, but another call doesn't hurt. 2, you are going to call other representatives and senators. Then we have to target the conference committee members. Those are the people who are discussing it and debating it right now. And I can put that graphic back up if you didn't already get the numbers. Also, we're targeting the governor, right? Phone calls, lobby days at the State House, and so on and so forth. 2 things. Steve O'Neill from Epica, is he still here? Okay. I believe that Epica is planning a day on January 9th. I'm waiting on the details of that. Anyone who has signed up will get further details about an action that may take place at the State House on January 9th. We also know that the conference committee is meeting on January 12th. That's another action item. All right? So those are several right there. Is that enough to keep you busy and occupied for a minute, okay? And we'll get to the rest later, all right? Phone calls to your senator, representative, phone calls to the other senators and representatives, phone calls to the members of the conference committee, phone calls to the governor, and we're preparing for action days to go to the State House to petition those same people. Clear? Yes, ma'am.
I'm just going to add, send emails to your whole email list
Yes,
to
yes.
do the same thing.
Right, emails, Facebook, MySpace, you still use it, Black Planet, whatever you do. Twitter, definitely Twitter.
Definitely Twitter.
So I just wanted to quickly just respond to that as well. For action items, I think Jamal listed them all, but I want to make one point. We have to be organized. We have to be organized. When we got 1,000 emails about farm animals, it was very organized. They came in a row, they all came in 1 week, they were concentrated, they shut down our computer system, they shut down our phone system, we had to pay attention to that. So those index cards that you filled out, it's very important that you get those so we need to start having a clearinghouse in our city. You know, I know because I've been one of the people that say it, but I know it gets said about the city and the leadership in the city, and it's that nothing's gonna change. And people are absolutely right, nothing's gonna change until we change. Until we change how we do it, until we get organized, and not just one and dones, and not just when the cameras are out, not just for a community meeting, but every day taking the message home to your relatives, coming down to the State House, checking in, calling your counselors. You'd be surprised, and I'm gonna say that we don't do enough either way. So, speaking for myself as an elected official, I can do more to get more information out to the community. But I'll tell you, I get more phone calls from districts that I've never been to, parts of Massachusetts that I've never been to in my life. I get more phone calls about their issues than any city issue ever. More phone calls than I get about homicide, more phone calls than I get about incarceration or any bills. We don't get enough phone calls to hear from you. And it's great to assume that we're working for you because we are. It's great to assume that we know what the issues are because we do. But we still need to hear from you. We still have to have a mutual relationship, a back and forth. And that's everybody. So everybody in this room needs to take part in it. If you need to know, ask questions, you need to know answers, don't be afraid to ask. We don't expect everybody to be a political juggernaut. If you don't know who your rep is, like Rep Rushing said, ask one of us. We will find it for you. Call us, we'll look it up for you. That is our job to serve you, but we need to know how to serve you. We need to do that by hearing from you. So I just wanted to put that out there.
And I just want to say one additional thing, and just to reiterate what Attorney Duggan said, is when you call, know what you're calling about. If you're going to call and say you're against the bill, say you're against the 3 strikes portion of the bill. If you say the bill, you're getting rid of some really good things that are in there, like eliminating the school zone and the mandatory minimums that we need. Say you're against the 3 strikes portion of the bill. That's what we're here talking about. You have to be clear on that, because if not, they'll just think the whole bill and they'll discount what you're saying, because there's a lot of stuff in there, so you have to be specific.
I want to address something that Attorney Dugan asked. She wanted to know what was the use of contacting the governor and asking him to veto this bill, because there's so many votes at the moment in the legislature to override the veto. I agree that there are many votes at the moment to override this veto, but if we get him to veto the bill, that gives us more time to work on getting more people to change their minds. And we've got to. We've got to mobilize, but we need the time, because we were asleep. I admit it, I was asleep. But if we don't get the governor to veto it, if we don't get enough time to work on it, we're not going to get the solution we want. So, that's the advantage to getting the governor to veto it.
No, and I understand what you're saying. My point is, don't think that you can put all your eggs in that basket. That you need to be talking to the governor now to get a better bill instead of waiting for a really dreadful thing and then asking him to veto it in light of the fact that he's already thrown his weight with those who want a tougher law. So we don't want to wait till that very end point. That's too late. But your point's well taken. Excellent. Call again.
I just want to put in a brief word, another point of view. Sometimes no bill is better than a bad bill. You cannot tweak a bad bill. You cannot reform racism. That's it. You don't want the bill? You want it to be opposed by the legislature. It's Patrick's idea. This stuff is coming from Patrick. The parole issues, the oversight, working in tandem. It's racist, it's classist. You can't tweak racism. And I also want to put in another word, maybe as an opinion that isn't generally held. And that is that when you limit your work to legislative stuff, you're just buying into this whole thing that we have a government that represents us and does all that we don't. There are people, maybe locally, that do. And so by allowing people to advocate that all the work is legislative, we're just kind of going along and reacting. If there's pushback in other areas of your life that this is not acceptable, you don't want it, you're not going to be a supplicant at the State House asking if they can stop, instead of cutting off both arms and legs, just cut off one. Push them to oppose it. You may not get what you want, but if you ask them to make it better, you're buying it and you're helping to strengthen the prison industrial complex. Thanks.